This is Nathan Walsh doing a sound check.
Hi, Nathan. Welcome.
This is Shelby, sound check.
You passed the sound test.
So good, Lee's on.
Okay. Hi, Kim.
Aiden's telling us we're good to go. Do we have Sheila and Christy on yet, or?
Hi, this is Sheila. I'm here.
Oh, thank you, Sheila. And Christy just joined. So I think we've got everybody here. Oops. Sorry, someone saying something?
We're getting echo somewhere.
Yeah, I guess if folks can put it on mute until you're talking, I think that would be helpful. Sometimes, if not, we get echoes. Okay, perfect. So welcome to the Board of Selectmen meeting. We did...
Hold, Ian, one sec.
Yep.
Aiden, we're ready to start. Okay, he should have us going now. Sorry about that, Ian.
Oh, no problem. So welcome everybody to the Board of Selectmen meeting call for this Tuesday, March 31st. We did have an earlier executive session. We did go live and voted to go into executive session. I made the statement prior to that, but I'll just read it here now for folks that are joining just to make sure that everyone understands. But pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Paragraph 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Town of Westborough Board of Selectmen is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to view this meeting while in progress may do so by turning to Westborough TV's government channels on both Verizon and Charter, or streaming it online at westboroughTV.org/live or /live-stream-government. And also should note that this is Board of Selectmen at 5:30. This will then be moving in, I think, on the same line to a joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen and Board of Health beginning at 6:30. So with that, the item on agenda, the first item is discussion vote to designate a public safety official to submit a report to the Attorney General that sets forth the reasons why the declaration to postpone the annual town meeting was made per Mass General Law, Chapter 39, Section 10A. Christy, do you just want to just give us the update on this? You're on mute, Christy.
I said something really exciting. No, so as the board's aware, our town moderator declared that a public safety emergency as a reason for postponing town meeting, which he can do under that section of law. He did that on Thursday. So we have 10 days to file that with the Attorney General's office. And under the law, the Board of Selectmen has to designate a public safety official to do that. So I would recommend that you designate Chief Purcell as our emergency management director. I've already talked to him about it. And so, he and I can work together on that, but we do have to do that under the law.
Thanks, Christy. Can I ask for a motion from somebody on the board?
Yeah, I'll make go ahead, Alan.
I move that we designate our emergency management director, Chief Purcell, to submit the necessary forms and paperwork to the Attorney General with respect to the delay in postponement of town meeting.
Second.
Okay, and Shelby, Selectman Marshall seconded that. Any discussion on that? Lee, it looks like you were on mute there. I don't know if you're trying to talk. Still not. You're still on mute. Well, while Lee's doing that, any other comments from other board members? Okay, then I think with that we have a motion. The second, Lee, are you able to get off mute there, or should be the bar on the bottom of your screen? Alan, are you able to help there or not?
Lee, you might want to exit and re-enter. And then you can try the software unmute again. I'm calling Lee to help her get in.
Okay.
Indeed. There's the microphone on. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Great. Thanks, Alan. Who would have thunk it?
So Lee, I know you're trying to say stuff before, but any comments in terms of Pat?
I think that's the best idea.
Okay. So with that, I'm going to go to a roll call vote. So Lee, I'll go with you first.
Yes. Emery, yes.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be Emery, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Selectman Edinburgh.
Yes.
Selectman Marshall.
Yes.
Selectman Hashmi.
Yes.
Selectman Johnson's yes. So that's 5-0 on that one. Okay. So the next agenda item is discussion vote on Selectmen to consider opportunities for townwide aid and recovery. And Christy, I'm going to turn back to you again. I know there's materials that were sent out, but why don't you take us through what you have?
Sure. So I apologize for getting that memo to you so late in the day. As you know, we're constantly trying to respond as things are changing. But, you know, in planning, at the end of last week, town staff started planning for, I guess, the next phase of this, which is really response in terms of responding to the community and resident and business needs. You know, we've all been looking at what other towns are doing and looking at resources within our own town. And so the document that I sent to you, just for the public's benefit, included some relief and pending legislation at the state level, the federal level, and then some things that we're doing at the local level. And so what I really wanted to focus on for this meeting was the first paragraph of that memo, which really talks about the creation of a task force. The idea of the task force being that we would pull together departments, town departments, as well as community groups whose current mission it is to provide some of that assistance to the residents of the community, and really work on coordinating efforts that I think are already going on, as well as identifying any needs that weren't being met, and then looking at ways to meet them. So I know that we've received a ton of interest from different groups and different individuals who want to be helpful, and I think that this task force could really work as could work to figure out what is needed, and then leverage all those individuals and other community groups in terms of making sure that things are getting done that need to get done. And also included in that memo was just some information about what some of our departments are doing right now. I think some of it is not as public as other things that we're doing as a community, because I think it's serving a population and serving in ways that we don't typically publicize. But Youth and Family Services is very busy responding to people who are in need, both clients who were their clients prior to this all happening, and then also some additional people. And the Senior Center is also being very responsive to people with their list of people that they're sort of checking in on growing every day. And so they would certainly be very key members of this task force. So the groups that I've identified in the memo are representatives from Youth and Family Services, Council on Aging, town manager and assistant town manager, emergency management director, which is Chief Purcell, a representative from Westborough Public Schools. I've already talked to the superintendent about this, and then representatives from Westborough Cares. So the organizations within Westborough Cares are the Forbes Kirkside Foundation, In Your Shoes, and then St. Luke's Outreach are also included. So they've already sort of started to talk about this, but I think there's a lot of things going on in town, and I think that this would be, and also 2 selectmen, and this would just be a coordinated effort, and also, sort of take this really important work off of one department or one community group, and really, bring us together and create one resource for different needs in the community.
I think this is a great idea and spot on. I would suggest that we add a representative from the Westborough Interfaith Coalition, as that would give us access to every house of worship and all of the volunteer resources and visibility that they have in the community across their members and the people they serve as well.
That sounds like a good idea.
So Ian, can I ask about? I have some questions. Is this
Sure.
time to ask them? Is
Yeah.
that okay?
Yes.
Okay. So Christy, I think this is great, and I just wanted to again, well organized, and this is just a couple of thoughts, and I think and just for the public's information, I had emailed Ian and Christy with some of my thoughts, and one of the things that I just wanted to add was that there are a lot of, and this is just kind of like this came over the weekend, is that Newton has worked with United Way to set up a fund. I think it's like the Newton United Way Fund or something, where people can, through United Way, can donate money, and that way, so if there are individuals that they're trying to help, that there's a town resource that can track that expenditure. So that's just one thing for you to think about. The second is to have a list of basically mutual aid, which is person to person help. So one of the examples that I'd given to Christy and Ian was that, for instance, if you need medicines to be picked up from Stop and Shop, and I'm going to Stop and Shop, I can pick those medicines up. So if we can keep a list. Now, the problem, obviously, with a list like that is that you need to be online for it. And one of the things that concerns me is some of the seniors may not be that tech savvy, but I figure the senior center can help with that.
If I may, Selectman Hashmi, the senior center.
Sorry, can you just hold off? I just want to let Syed finish and then jump in if you don't mind.
Okay.
And then the other thing was, let's make sure that we keep our the other thing, and I don't want to throw the Board of the Health offer to say something, that the Board of Health has a list, for instance, particularly of restaurants that may not be reached by other means. And so that is, I know that there's Corridor 9, and there have been all these other communications from all these other organizations, which I've seen, which are great. But some of the smaller mom and pop restaurants may not be getting those communications, but I do know that they may be getting that, like Steve at the Board of Health may have access to those resources. So I just want to make sure that that avenue is not left untapped.
That's great. So I can respond to each of those. I think in terms of the restaurants and making sure that we get info out, I do think that that's part of the work of this task force, is making sure that we're getting information out in multiple means. So I think that that's spot on, as something that we should be doing. I think that we have community groups that maybe I haven't mentioned as being part of the task force, but certainly that are ready and willing to help, that have a great reach into the community. And then also, things that you've mentioned, resources that we might already have. In terms of the fund, I've spent a lot of time talking to other managers and looking at other funds that different communities have done. And so, in looking at, the model of working with a 501c3 or to set up the fund and having them, especially if you're working with one whose mission it already is to provide aid. I see that sort of similar, I think, to what you were just talking about, where they would receive money, and as opposed to the town receiving money, and they would work through the existing channels to do work that they're already really good at. And so I know that Kara, our Youth and Family Services Director, has already started talking to a couple of those organizations, and there's some interest. And so we will definitely, be forthcoming with that information once we have it. And then mutual aid, I think Alan was probably going to say what I was going to say, which is that the senior center is already doing a lot of that work. And probably we're going to see the need for, more people to do that. One of the things that we have to be careful of as a town is to be sending people out sort of on our behalf to provide help to people that we might not know. And so we certainly want to make sure that everyone's, properly quarried, and, that we're being responsible in terms of how that works. But I do think for right now, we do have people who are specifically picking up medications, dropping them off at doors, making sure that there's no contact. But definitely that's a need that I would say that this task force would also be addressing.
And that mutual aid is by phone, so you don't have to be online to request the help.
Right. And then so Ian, can I have the floor for 2 more minutes?
You sure can.
Is that okay?
No, it's fine.
Okay. And so just another couple of ideas that I just wanted to just throw out there, because one of my concerns is that how long this crisis will last. So I know, for instance, and just not to discuss, but maybe just for the task force to think about, is, for instance, Boston has declared a moratorium on eviction and foreclosures, and then plans to provide quarantine lodging for people that may need it. And so one of the things that, for instance, I think Worcester, and probably Christy already knows this, is that they've developed a plan to use their gym and college dorms to provide shelter in place shelter in place. And so I just throw that out there as something that we may need to develop, because as there are projections now that there may be a surge in April, and one of the concerns that I have is that there may be a homeless population, or there may be people that are now coming back into Westborough from other places in the state or in the country that may need lodging, and they may need to be quarantined. So just something to think about.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I was just thinking in general, when we're trying to speak, it might be helpful if you just had a list and started always Shelby, Lee, Syed, Alan, so we don't interrupt each other. One of the things I did today was I talked to Phil Kittredge, because he's had a good handle in the past on the homeless people in Westborough. He doesn't feel it's a problem right now. There are a few people living in cars, which I think Chief Laurie is aware of. but the people that were living in Cedar Swamp aren't living there anymore. But he used to have a good finger on the pulse of that population, and he would be pleased to join the task force if we'd like to have him, because I think he sees a different view of Westborough. So if we wanted to have him from the food pantry on the task force, he would do that. And he said he has two different sources, 13,000 and 15,000, and then 3,000 for resources. But 1 week's worth of those credit cards for people can go through that pretty quickly. So right now he feels like he's stable, but it really depends on how long this lasts. So it's just something to keep track of. And it's nice to note, I don't know if we want to do it publicly or not, a major corporation in Westborough donated $5,000 to him for credit cards and said they'd be happy to be called on again in the future. So we can find out if they would mind having their name used or not. But they reached out and they were really wonderful. So I'm just thinking about that part of representation on the committee. Otherwise, I think you did a great job, Christy. Everybody on there will really contribute beautifully.
Thanks. I think you're right. I think Phil would be great. I mean, he's already working very closely with Alma and Kara. So yeah, thank you.
Selectman Marshall, do you have anything?
I want to echo the board's thanks to Christy for putting this together. Christy and I have had a couple of conversations about this. I would say the majority of this is, majority of my thoughts are covered. I think the benefit of pulling together this task force is that, if we, as I said to Christy, in an ideal world and we weren't all socially distancing and separated, we'd have a bunch of stickies all over the place and we'd be like, what about this idea and who's got this and who's the best resource and is there a group already doing this and all those questions that I know are going through my mind and sounds like from the members of the board as well. So I think creating this task force gets us there, even if we're at a distance. One item I did ask Christy to look into today is, and I just happened to be out running an errand and saw that the senior center sign, has a no further activities, which is an appropriate message, of course, but having maybe a little more, I'm going to use the word maybe hopeful and proactive message out there. If you need help, call us, as well as using the Lyman Street Rotary Board, which again is right in proximity, but it sees maybe a different audience, to give people sort of a phone number, because to Syed's point, there are lots of people that might be out and about or helping someone who see a number and say, you know what, I'm helping someone that could use some help and here's a number to call. So I'll leave that in the good hands of Christy, but we should, certainly be utilizing those resources. And it's such an obvious one we talk about in the past to celebrate things, but one that I know I totally missed up until seeing it today.
And Mr. Chair, can I just add one more thing?
Sure.
It's Syed Hashmi. So, and one of the other things, again, Christy, this is just for the benefit of the rest of the board and any, God forbid, anyone that's listening. So one of our residents, Ms. Mayhew, had reached out to me about an idea to support restaurants via a GoFundMe campaign. So would the thing for her to do would it be to reach out to you directly and have her email you? Would that be the way to go to share her thoughts on, or if someone else has ideas, do they contact you? Would that be the way to go?
No, I think that this is the task force. I think what we're talking about is really residential relief. So helping families and individuals. In terms of business relief, I think Kim actually reached out to the chamber in terms of what they're doing and some programs that they might be offering. And so I think that's actually different. I know that I saw that Yelp has added like a donate now button to all of their restaurants so people can easily donate. And I know that some businesses are doing GoFundMes. But I guess I didn't foresee the work of the task force being specific to businesses. And maybe you want to let Kim just give you information about her conversation with Karen Chapman.
Sure, Kim, why don't you go ahead?
Okay. So I spoke with Karen yesterday, and the chamber is taking a very proactive approach to supporting not only, and it's not just targeted to its members, but more broadly. They are working to get information out, specifically restaurants. I've seen numerous lists come out, which restaurants are still open, urging folks to support those. But they're also trying to be sort of a resource and a link to any of the federal and state programs that are out there and available to a lot of the small businesses. So I probably get well over a dozen. I don't think that's an overstatement, probably a dozen emails through the chamber. They're really trying to get information out. So I think that becomes a good source for any of these activities. They're trying to do some coordination, but it's really, I think they're also trying to streamline it and make sure that, particularly with small businesses that may need assistance, the programs that have now come out through the Small Business Administration, the SBA website has some great information.
Yeah, and one of my concerns, sorry. Yeah.
Sorry, Sayed, I was just going to jump in there, is that, I've done a lot of looking at that as well. And I think it's for me, I think individual businesses can do GoFundMe. I think having the town sponsor it for every single business, I'm not sure, but I think the task force, it could be something that's discussed there. But I think that the SBA absolutely should be the first place these businesses should go. I mean, for small businesses, there's an immediate, within 3 days, as it's up and running, is going to be $10,000 available to these small businesses. That is called a loan, but it does not need to be repaid. I think every small business should be going through that application process to access those funds as appropriate. And then there's also the larger kind of loan program that, as I read it, goes up to $10 million if you're less than 500 employees, and it will pay for various expenses, including payroll and other things. And it's incentivizing you to keep people on the payroll. And the more that you're able to do that, the less of that loan that you're eligible for that you have to repay. As I look at those, and those have come through the federal government, who has much bigger dollars than we do. Right. First and foremost, I think that's where we should be directing these small businesses to go through, because I think those will be much more lucrative and timely for them to get access to funds that could help them today.
Well, and I think that the task force can be helpful in terms of getting this type of information out, like you had mentioned earlier, Syed. But I guess I just wanted to be clear that in terms of providing, creating a fund and providing monetary relief, that what I had been talking about was really focused on.
No, I agree with you. Sorry, Christy, no. I agree I think you're right. It should be towards the residents. I just want to make sure that, so just to be clear, there is efforts going just for the audience and so there are already efforts going via the chamber. Residents can contact the chamber with their ideas. Yes, would that be a correct thing to do?
So if I may just add something here, being very much in the thick of all of the small business activities. I know Selectman Marshall and I, as business owners, have had some conversations on this as well. If the town gets involved in any fundraising for businesses, the fact that a program exists could prevent them from getting money from the federal programs, because the federal programs are designed to be relief of first and last resort. So there's some short-term emergency financing, which is really intended to be a bridge grant or loan. There's a $10,000 one, as Ian mentioned. There's a $25,000 program. Both will get you money in 3 to 7 business days. But then the payroll protection program that Ian referred to, that's incenting businesses to keep people on payroll, and the long-term economic injury discovery loan program, as the guidance is currently published, both would require businesses in areas where other sources of relief are available to show that they applied and were denied. The need for businesses to get in and speak to an SBA lender is urgent, because the SBA will probably be managing this through existing SBA lenders. So if businesses don't have a relationship with an SBA lender, they should talk to their own banker, move forward. But anything we did officially as a town would be considered another relief program and it could interfere with people's qualifications.
And I don't want that. And trust me, thank you.
Right. So we just need to hold off for now.
Yeah, I don't want. But the thing is, going back to what I said earlier, and just to but there are people that may not know about these resources, and I just want to make sure that we use all those avenues to hit the smaller restaurants that may not have access, or they may have a language impediment to understanding these things. There may be small business owners that are not proficient in English that may miss out on these and I just don't want that to happen. That's all.
Yeah, I think that's
agreed.
Great. I think that we should definitely consider that with the task force, getting that information out.
Yeah, and I think because Alan has provided a number of these things, and Christy, I think you've put them on the website. So we have links there, especially I think the SBA stuff is there. I think that encouraging those businesses to go out there, I think, the ways that we can, publicize that absolutely should be done. I think hopefully that task force can do that as well. Christy, one other thing, I know we had talked a little bit about this, but can you talk about the some of the thinking that's going on around the senior and disabled veteran tax relief workers and some more?
Yeah, so the senior tax work-off program is going to start helping out with the list of people that the senior center has checking in. So they're going to actually be earning their hours by calling seniors that we've identified as people that we want to check in on, or that maybe family members have identified. That was a great idea that Leah Talbot had, and I know that Alma is running with that. I also want to point out that Bob Haley, our treasurer collector, and Leah worked with Invoice Cloud, which is the system that we currently, you can pay your bills online through. And right now there's, or as of this morning, there's no longer a 40-cent charge to pay your bills online. That's a cost that the town's going to be absorbing, so that people can comfortably pay their bills online going forward. And then also included in that memo were some additional relief that the town can potentially provide. The governor's put forward a bill that would allow the Board of Selectmen to vote to give some relief around taxes, specifically extending deadlines and waiving fines, fees, and penalties. But Bob Haley, as the treasurer collector under statute, is already able to do that up to $15, and he has been doing that. So.
Great. Thanks, Christy.
Okay, and just one final point. I just double checked. The town's website and the COVID-19 pages are translating into other languages. There is a little pull-down menu at the top of the website in the header that you can pick one of more than a couple dozen languages. So if folks have a language barrier and need guidance, they can go into a language that's familiar to them.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Alan. And you taught me something here. I did not know that. And but I think that's great. It's just another reason to continue, and I know a bunch of you fellow selectmen have, in terms of social media posts, whatever, directing folks to the town website, trying to, the work that Christy and Kim and others have been doing there. But I think getting that one spot and knowing that that's translated into various languages, again, is a great place to direct folks to. And then for all of us, is if there's things that are missing or suggestions that you have for additional things to put out there, just, reach out to Christy and or Kim to get those out there. Selectman Marshall, I see you in front of me, so I'm going to let you go. And then Selectman Emery, I'm going to ask you to go next. So
great. Thank you, Ian. Christy, it would be helpful. I think all of this effort is great and fantastic. You probably know where I'm going to go with this comment, but one of the things I think we need to be is somewhat data driven around this. And I'll use an example. I'm looking at the task force document that you've sent out. I think it's fantastic, all the outreach that we're doing, but I also think we need to sort of have a baseline. I know that when the senior center started talking about this, I think it was like we're reaching out to 130 or 140 people. I've heard that number is upwards over 160 now. I think it would be helpful. I know that from Kara Presley's prior presentations with Youth and Family Services, they have presented, this is how many people we're counseling, what have you. But I think it would be helpful to start to see some data, not to be reported out on any regular basis, but that we know that we're collecting, that how many people we're reaching out to. We don't need names, we don't need any of that. But I just think it's important because we're not going to know. It's great to know how many, but that doesn't tell us how many people we're missing, or how many more people we need to add, and potential other resources that you and your teams have to sort of shift around in order to meet that need. So it would be nice to start to see some quantitative data, as we go forward. That would be one thing I would like to see. The other thing that I would add is that as we're doing outreach through, particularly to our seniors, I don't know if as we're working with senior volunteers, which I love the senior tax write-off folks, that's a fantastic idea, is the plan to give them a script so that there's consistent outreach in how we're approaching folks. I don't mean it has to be a robotic call, but I feel like there should be, a couple key things that are being asked of every call, in addition to the nature of it being a social call. Thank you.
Hi, Ian?
Yep.
Okay. This is going sort of off script for this. I think what you've put together for responses and explaining it is wonderful. But I'm thinking we probably down the road are going to have to start looking at the impact of a shortage of revenue or a change in our revenue to the town, our overall picture. And I heard today on the news that Charlie Baker is worried about them closing their year without a deficit, because by law they can't close the deficit, so they'd have to cut services. And I'm very glad that over this period of time we've maintained an excess levy, that we have good free cash, and we've got reserves. And I presume you're already starting to look at this, Christy. Are we going to be able to afford to run the way we normally run? And if we aren't, we want to be ahead of that sort of issue. So I'm just putting that out there for future agendas and thoughts.
Yeah, I'd also raised this last week. Well, sorry, go ahead. Yeah, because I think we need to go ahead.
Christy, why don't you go ahead?
If I could just speak, so I think what Simon was saying is that you did bring it up last week, but when you brought it up, we were asking for balances, and we get those on a monthly basis, so we haven't gotten it for March yet, so that's why I don't have it for you tonight. But certainly, I have a meeting with our finance. Our sort of internal finance team on Thursday, because we're looking at revenues for the fourth quarter, and we're also looking at FY21 budgets again. And then next week we hope to have a larger finance team meeting where we can go over some of this stuff. And I had a department head meeting on Friday, and we put the message out there that spending in this fourth quarter, we're going to have to be really looking at every dollar that's going out, and then also that we might need to be looking at FY21 budgets again.
Yeah, and Lee, thank you for bringing that up. It's also something that we've gotten a note from the chair of the finance committee, who sits on the finance team with us. It's something that Christy and I have discussed, but it's important. I mean, I think some of the things that have been given as relief through the state to businesses, which is great, also directly impacts the town. And there is significant revenue that we will lose from meals taxes, and probably more that we lose from the hotel occupancy tax. And as folks know, some of our hotels in town are actually shut down, and those that are open don't have a lot of people in them. So even though what the state has put through is a deferral program in terms of having them pay, and whether that stays as a deferral or it basically waives it, we will be determined, I think, as you go forward. Right now, it's just a delay, but I think we need to be prepared that those revenues that we would have expected to come in the fourth quarter may not be there. I think the good thing is we've always been very conservative in our budget season when we've put together our revenue expectation. It's one of the reasons I think why our free cash has been so strong, but I think the expectations we should have out there is that we're going to see, revenue declines, and I would expect, even though we're withholding on expenses, as Christy said, which is just great that the town's doing that. That's prudent fiscal management there. We should be expecting, I think, that we'll see a significant decrease in free cash when we get certified in the fall. That is a potential that we may see that. But I think those are the things that, as Christy said, a lot of it is work that the individual departments are putting together. She'll call together her internal finance team, and then we'll get the external finance team, and then we'll be able to report something out to the board probably at our next regularly scheduled meeting. I'm looking at Christy, and
probably by that's the 14th. So probably by the 14th, we'll definitely be able to give you more information.
Yeah. So Lee, thank you for bringing that up. But yeah, it's definitely something that we as a board need to be focused on and on top of.
I figured I wasn't the first person to think about it.
No, but thank you for bringing it up. It's important.
And just
Selectman Hashman, I cut you off before, so please go ahead.
No. I just wanted to just throw two things out there. One is land purchases. I know we've agreed on them. I think it's really important that there were things that I certainly supported, purchasing land for certain prices. As more data becomes available, we may need to reconsider the prices that we were paying for some of that land, some of the land that we may not, for instance, no longer need to buy. It's something we just need to keep in our heads. And then the last thing, just to throw out there is, and this is very, very painful, is that, I recognize that we had committed to certain pay raises for employees, but, this is a different environment. So I just raised that.
Yeah, I think one of the things we have to consider there is, as we've talked about a lot, most of our pay raises are via union contracts.
Right.
We only a small percentage of our town is non. So I think it's something we have to consider. But yeah, you're spot on. I think we have to look at everything. I think that's also why some of the things you brought up are related to town meeting warrant articles and 2021 budgets, and I think it's something that we're gonna have to look at and see whether what we put in there still makes sense, and that's going to be both our side and I think between our conversations and us as a board with our counterparts on the school committee, talking to them, and with Christy, with the superintendent, to have those discussions as we move forward. I think it is something that we're going to have to focus on. I would, back to the comment about the state. Again, the state doesn't have a budget yet. We've got preliminary numbers. I think we should be expecting that those preliminary numbers may not be as high as they were before. I mean, there's a lot of unknowns out there, and I think we have to be conservative. And again, there's things we can do. We know we have an October town meeting, that things can be updated by that time if things have changed. But when we move forward with our town meeting and are voting on budgets, I think it definitely will be something that we as a board and finance committee and others will relook at, budgets and articles to see exactly what you said, Selectman Hashmi, as to whether there are any changes that we may want to propose or the town departments want to make in terms of their budgets. So I think I will, not to cut people off, but we do have first and foremost the proposal that was out there in terms of the task force. And I would entertain a motion, if a selectman would like to do that, to move forward with that recommendation as amended with the.
So I don't need a vote to create the task force because I'm creating that.
Okay.
As to who you are interested in being on it from the board.
Okay. How about a non-binding vote of endorsement for it? I think we heard that, but our folks all, I think what I heard is everyone's supportive of the idea.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay. Do I have volunteers for selectmen that would like to be on the task force?
I'd be willing to do that.
So the first two that came to me were Selectman Marshall and
I would
Selectman.
as well.
We only need two.
Yeah.
Alan, you came in after me, but do you feel very strongly about it?
Well, I'm certainly got my hands full with my business and responsibilities here. I'm happy if you want to be on it, Lee, and take the lead. I can, provide information. Both Shelby and I are pretty tapped into what's happening on the business community side of things, and can bring that knowledge and information into the committee.
I think being retired, I have a little more flexibility than the rest of you, even though I have other things on my plate. I think some of those may slow down for a little while, because if we're reaching out to the public and trying to get a lot of public input, I don't think we're going to get as robust an input as we would want, say, on the master plan, given the way things are playing out. And we're paying for a consultant. We may want to say, I'm just floating this, we may want to say to the consultant, let's put this on hold until we know we can have robust responses. I don't know. So anyway, I'm thinking some of my other duties may not be as demanding, and I'd be happy to do this. And I have a sort of a clinical background, which I think might be helpful too.
Great, thank you.
That works.
Okay. Alan, you want to make appreciate that. I think that Shelby and Lee were the first two that I saw raise their hands here, and you were the third, but
that's fine.
You're okay with that? Do you want to make a motion to the effect of who the two selectmen would be?
Sure. I move that Selectman Marshall and Selectman Emery represent the Board of Selectmen on the task force, the COVID-19 task force.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Selectman Hashmi. Seconded. Any further discussion on that?
I appreciate the board's support of the concept and of myself and Lee. And I think that in order for any task force like this to be successful, it's going to be input from many. So I can assure you, we'll be coming back to you guys to say, all right, what do you think? And I've been taking copious notes here, but I think those have to keep coming just because we're the board's representative to make this, worthwhile and beneficial as Christy pulls us all together. Thank you.
I agree.
Absolutely not. I changed my phone number and email while we were talking.
And just since we're discussing this, one of the other things I would think about is that to me, this task force, this response takes priority in my eyes over almost everything else that we as a town, to me, this should be a priority because this has effects on our residents, their emotional, physical health, but also on their financial health. So this response, how we respond should be a town prior. Should be, I know we have a set of goals, but to me, this in a sense supersedes that. So I don't know if we want to revisit the goals in light of this or have a discussion about it separately, but I would just throw that out there.
That's interesting. I think that it probably would be beneficial for all of us independently to go back and look at those. Obviously, it's not on the agenda tonight, but just to make sure that we have the right priorities in place and that, there might just be some things that conscientiously we have to put on hold. I don't know.
Yeah,
we could discuss this next time or something next time we have a board meeting. But to me, this response should be like number one of the things that we should be doing as a town.
No, so I think you're right. When we put a strategic plan in place, it didn't anticipate a crisis event like this. I think we all would agree that this needs to be prioritized. I think we have been prioritizing it. We've been proverbial drinking from the fire hose, and things are very fluid and changing. But I think the work that has been done and will continue to be done makes sense. And I think we're all in agreement that this needs to take priority and move forward, as expeditiously as soon as possible.
Yeah, I would say that COVID-19 has probably been the only thing that Kim and I have dealt with in the last 3 weeks, and that's also true. I think of your meetings. Pretty much, we've tried to do the other things we need to do, but I also just kind of want to say that Westborough Cares, the group that we're going to really be partnering with, are already doing a lot of this good work. So I just want to, highlight the fact that, we want to work with them, but they're already doing a lot of these really good things. And so the task force is really just an effort in related to COVID-19, but they are doing this good work without us. So I'm anxious to learn from them too.
And I think to that point, Christy, I envision the task force as bringing everyone together again to make sure that we're maximizing all the resources and not replicating like, oh, I didn't know you were doing this, and we were starting our own little thing over, another group starting their own little thing. So absolutely, sort of reining all the resources in and understanding.
And one thing I'd like to add though is also recognition of our town department heads and staff, because looking at the updates and information coming through Christy, it's very clear that our departments are thinking about how much they can do and doing the most possible given the situation and with the right focus. So I think it's important that the town recognize that the resources and efforts aren't just at our board level and aren't just on Christie's desk and Kim's desk, that it goes to all the department heads and filters down to every town employee who's playing a part in our response and our service to the community. So I want to recognize that.
Thank you, Ellen.
Ian, may I add a quick thing?
Sure.
Today, the school department had the buses and about 50 vehicles drive the bus routes. So my grandson was out at the end of the driveway and he was able to wave, and the bus that has his teachers on it stopped at the end of our driveway and said, "Hey, Murray," and it really, really thrilled him. It was such a unusual and wonderful thing for the school department to do.
Yeah, no, I think it's just to echo what both of you said. I mean, I think the town, the schools, really pulling together everyone's doing yeoman's phenomenal work. It's what we do. And I think we all appreciate that. So we have a motion on there for the two selectmen. I don't think we voted on that yet. And it was seconded by Selectman Hashmi. So roll call vote, and Selectman Emery, because you're in front of me, I'm going to ask you for vote first. I didn't hear you there, but I think you said thumbs up, right?
Thumbs up, and thank you very much for appointing me.
Oh, perfect. Selectman Hashmi.
Yes.
Selectman Edinburgh.
Yes.
Selectman Marshall.
Yes.
And Selectman Johnson, yes. So thank you to both of you guys, and we look forward to working with you and hearing the work that you guys do in the task force. We've got 3 minutes before we're scheduled to join with the joint meeting of the Board of Health. Anything else to come before the Board of Selectmen at this point?
I'm just curious from Christy's view to Alan's point, how are the departments doing? I think they're doing incredible work. Of just, Christy, how are the spirits, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think that, we check in. I think Kim and I both talk to the department heads, I would say maybe daily. And I think, people are feeling good about the work that they're able to do. A lot of people are missing being in the office. People really just want to be at their desks and be available, especially, our offices that get a lot of public visitors. But I do think that, people are just anxious to get back to work and are happy about what they can provide right now. So definitely feeling support from the community.
Good.
Thanks.
And just one other thing I'd just like to add. So, Christy, do you think that we can, one of my concerns is that this will go on for a prolonged period, and are we ready? This may go on beyond the summer. Worst case scenario, are we going to be okay? I guess, are we ready for that potentially?
I think that we are, we're still able to provide a lot of the essential services that we provide. Our DPW crew is still working on a reduced alternating schedule, so they're continuing to move forward. Obviously our public safety departments are doing amazing work as they continue to move forward. And then, all of our other departments are relocated remotely, but we're continuing to do the work that we need to do to make sure that we're well set up. Certainly plans that we may have had for other projects have to be put on hold, and that's something we'll just have to see how it plays out. But and then obviously not having a budget passed on July 1st would be something that we would have to deal with. And certainly Governor Baker is working on what that will look like for us, but that's going to be, it's specifically, like if you look at the articles that are related to the DPW and some of the work that they would typically do in the spring and early summer, if we, for whatever reason, don't have a town meeting until the summer, that's really going to impact their ability to take advantage of the good weather season. So we just have to sort of see what comes as it comes.
Yeah, and I think Christy and Syed, to your question, I think it's we're going to have to deal with it. We're going to have to look at it. I think we all hope that it doesn't proceed for that long, but I think Christy hit on it. I think that's what we need to prepare for, kind of the worst case and hope for the best case. So we'll, again, as for us as a board and policy, we have, I think it goes back to some of the stuff about strategic plan. I think that puts a refocus that we can address at future Board of Selectmen meetings about, maybe there's some changes and some other things we need to look at that weren't on that initial list. But as we said, at times like these, there's things that may get added and other things put on hold based on the needs in front of us. So I think that's something we should, keep our minds on and think about. With that, I know that we're at 6:30. I just passed that, which is the time for our joint meeting with the Board of Health. And I think I've seen, I know the Board of Health member Hashmi is still on. I did see Mr. Walsh and Mr. Ehrlich join. I think Steve Bakari as well. So as I had said the last meeting, I'm going to relinquish chairmanship to Chairman Walsh for this part of the meeting with the Board of Health and have them lead it, but this is a joint meeting on our side. But Nathan, if you're ready, I'd love to have you take over.
Thank you, Ian. I appreciate all the hard work that the Board of Selectmen are doing and all the town divisions and departments are doing as well. It's real reassuring to see that, business is actually getting done even in the midst of this pandemic. Just in case our meetings do get split up for archival purposes, I'd like to just read a little introductory paragraph. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Westborough Board of Health will be conducted by a remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with a right and or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Westborough's website at town.westborough.ma.us. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so in the following manner using Westborough TV. No in-person attendance of the members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we'll post on the Town of Westborough's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. So with that, I'd like to open the Board of Health meeting and for March 31st. And there's basically three things that I wanted to talk about, and there might be a few other things that some of the other members want to, but the first is talking about our case numbers. This was something that the Board of Selectmen had requested and that the director of the Board of Health, Steve Bakari, has tabulated. The second issue relates to some questions from residents regarding construction in town. And the third was some information that came up in the Department of Public Health call with local boards of health, specifically relating to convenience stores and self-serving of coffee and soda filling stations. So with that, I think that, Alan, are you online and connected? Can we do a sound check with you?
I am online, just I had myself muted.
Excellent. So I think the first item is the report from the Board of Health about the case numbers. And once Steve is done presenting that, then I think we can have a little bit of discussion around that. So with that, Steve, I'd like to turn the floor over to you.
Well, thank you. So I'm hoping that everyone has seen the reports I've generated the last Friday and then on Tuesday. And do you want me to read the numbers or?
Yeah, I think that's the best thing to do for this,
Okay.
Because there may be people at home.
Sure. So right now, as of this morning, and luckily none of this changed today. So these numbers are the most current that we have. We have 14 total cases of confirmed COVID-19 in town. These are people who were lab tested and the test came back positive. We've had 5 cases of people who we're presuming are positive. These are people that have had close contact with confirmed cases that did develop symptoms but were not tested. So we kind of treat them the same as someone who had been tested with symptoms. And as far as quarantining people, these are people who had exposure to someone who was symptomatic, but they're not sick yet. We quarantined them for 14 days from the time of their last exposure. We've had 27 cases of quarantines that we've had to oversee. So as far as total cases of confirmed and presumptive COVID-19 cases, we've had 19 total, like I said, pretty much 50-50 split down the line, 9 female, 10 male. And the age groupings are pretty well spread out from 1 that's under 19, 5 that are between 20 and 29, 4 that are between 30 and 39, 1 between 40 and 49, 4 between the ages of 50 and 59, 2 between the ages of 60 and 69, and 2 residents over 70 that tested positive or that are perceived to be positive based upon symptoms. And as far as their status at this time, 7 have recovered, and that means we've followed them through their symptomatic period and based upon CDC's guidelines as far as when to let them off of isolation. Actually, for lack of a better word, dismiss them from isolation. There are 9 right now that are at home in the process of recovering. 2 are hospitalized. Neither one are on ICU. They're in the hospital beds. I believe 1 may be on the ventilator, but and then there's 1 that I don't know anything about. I've called multiple times to the phone. I sent a letter the other day, so I'm waiting to hear back from that 1 resident. And as far as number of cases, this is old data. This is from yesterday. I think at that time it was 57, 52 in Massachusetts confirmed cases. I think that's way up. I think it's above 6,000 today. Maybe wrong about that.
It's 6620 as of this afternoon.
Okay. Do you have the Worcester data, Dr. Ehrlich?
I do. Give me 1 second. I can pull that up.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I should have got the most current data.
So you want the Worcester County?
Yes.
Worcester County is at 433.
Okay. And then again, Westborough at 19. Now, there was a question that Lee had asked about, where were the people exposed? It's been both. There's been some travel history to parts of other countries that, that have high rates, but many of them don't know. Could have just been community transmission, that sort of thing. So we are seeing community transmission now, in Massachusetts and, country. So that's not unreasonable to think that that's happening.
So the State Department of Public Health has encouraged boards of health not to release the numbers at a town level, mainly because they're issuing recommendations for the entire state. And some of the towns in the state have very small populations. And so they're worried about HIPAA privacy violations, where the information that people give out, if it makes it so that you can identify who it is, then it becomes problematic for the town if we're violating HIPAA rules. So we've actually looked at this data and we've decided that the level of detail that we're releasing right now is appropriate. And I think that if Dr. Hashmi or Dr. Ehrlich, disagree, they should certainly chime in. But I think as of last meeting, we had talked about it and we decided that this was appropriate. There was a request by the Board of Selectmen to try to give a little bit more information about particularly location and precincts. And with the small number of cases that we have in town right now, we had decided that it wasn't appropriate at this point in time to give out location details. We did, though, talk about that there would be a time when we have a lot more cases when it might make sense in the aggregate to give out some information about locations. And so we are tracking it, but we just aren't releasing the data at the level of where within town things are happening. Do you have something, Dr. Ehrlich?
Yeah, not related to what you say. First of all, I'm okay with what we're releasing in terms of information. I think that's appropriate. And I agree that the location data is probably, we're not ready for that yet. I did have two other comments about the report, and then I'll turn it over to Dr. Hashmi. One is, just to be clear, those Worcester County numbers I read and the state numbers, those are for confirmed cases, of which we have 14. The 5 that are presumptive, I don't think are counted in the state data that way. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, but that's how I read the reports.
No, you're right. They're just doing laboratory confirmed cases.
Yep. Okay. And then the second thing, and this is for going forward, the thing that bothered me when I was looking at the report today, aside from the fact that the numbers were up, that bothered me. But we put the people in quarantine who are exposed but have no symptoms in a table that's talking about cases, and they're really not cases. They're just people under observation. But I think we should reserve the language of cases for people who are confirmed or presumed. And these people are definitely not in that category. So maybe we can break that out separately in future reports. Is that seem reasonable to
I'm
people?
with you, Dr. Ehrlich. It's Syed. I'm with you on this one. I agree with your point.
Yeah, we can change the language in the report a little bit. I don't think that's an issue.
Yeah, that's all.
I did want to, in talking about the increase in numbers, Massachusetts has seen a daily increase in cases, about 30% per day. So that if you look at the total number of cases as there were today, you expect that it's going to increase by 30% tomorrow. And so that's been tracking for the past, 6 or so days at that level. There's only 2 states in the country that have that as high of a rate as Massachusetts, and that is Idaho and West Virginia. New York and Washington and Maine are at the other end of the spectrum. They're increasing by about 15% per day. And so Washington and New York have gone through a large growth where a large number of people were infected. And I think people are starting to take this seriously. And that's why their current trend is actually now down at 15%. I think Maine is actually at 15% because they've got a lot of built-in social isolation because the population density is so low. But just to kind of give people a sense as to what that would mean is that if we're at 19 cases right now, 1 week from now, if we're at 30% per day increase, we'd be at 120 cases. And in 2 weeks, we'd be at 750 cases. If we're instead tracking at the 15% level, then we'd go from 19 to 50 cases. And in 2 weeks, we'd be at 130 cases. So that difference is going to be like, 620 cases that we would have extra if in 2 weeks, if we're at 30% rather than 15%. So I really want to stress that any sort of social distancing that we can do is important. It does have an effect, and it is going to help keep our numbers lower. There are a large number of asymptomatic individuals. And so just because people don't have symptoms doesn't mean that they can't spread the virus. So things like I hear about people that are, walking with their neighbors or their kids are going visiting friends. All of those behaviors are things that are going to make us at the 30% level rather than the 15% level. So I just kind of wanted to stress again to anybody that is listening that we really have to do a better job. Massachusetts is not doing that well right now. Worcester County is also just slightly below Massachusetts. I think they're at maybe, instead of Massachusetts, I think is at 31%. I think Worcester County is at 33% per day. So I'd really like Westborough to do better than that, and anything we can do on that front would be a good policy.
So Dr. Ehrlich, I had a couple of things. Thank you. Can I just add to your comments?
Sure.
So a couple of things. One, I recognize, and again, Steve, thank you very much for your continuous updates. I know you and Christy have been on the go for the past 3 weeks, so again, thank you for that. Couple of things. One, I know we've talked about this, but I recognize because of HIPAA confidentiality, we as a quote-unquote town cannot reveal information about who people are. But I'm wondering, how are we communicating to, like, if I'm patient X, what are we as a town telling me to tell friends, family, relatives, neighbors? Are we doing anything are we telling people that they should inform their jobs, because I worry, in prior epidemics, granted they were in the pre-social media age, people used to let there'd be a marker outside your home letting people know that, there was I'm just saying that, but I raised that because the thing is, according to there was a science article that was published. The journal Science published an article recently, which looked at which estimated that for every confirmed case, there are likely 5 to 10 more people in the community with an undetected infection. So, granted, we have these numbers. If you look at those numbers, and if you extrapolate that, at the minimum, there are 5 tons more people that are infected. So I raised that. The second, and this is something I raised earlier when we discussed this, is that, and Steve answered this question, but we are not counting the nursing home rehab facilities that are in our communities, because those numbers get reported separately. But I'm wondering, should we as a Board of Health be reaching out to those communities, to those facilities, to say, what is going on in your facilities? How many cases do you have? And should we be including those numbers in our numbers? Because residents in this town may be working in those facilities and may be exposed to those to the virus there.
I mean, Steve, do you want to? I mean, you do contact tracing. You want to address that?
Yeah. So a lot there, Syed. Let me see if I can answer all the questions. So as far as the average resident in their home, they get, they test positive. Yeah, we do, as Dr. Ehrlich said, we do contact tracing. So I do talk to the person. We trace back for household contacts or anyone that may have been exposed while they're symptomatic. And we obviously, if there are friends or someone out of town, we talk to the Board of Health where the friends live. They do follow up. As far as like the general public, if you are not exposed or identified in that contact tracing, then you wouldn't know about it, and there's really no reason for you to know about it. What people do on their own, whether they let people know they're positive or not, there's all kinds out there. So I can't say for who's telling who what, depending upon it just depends upon how they their own setup, I guess.
So I mean, if I'm so I guess that and I recognize we need to maintain patient confidentiality, and I recognize we do not want to cause a panic, absolutely not. But I guess I raise that because I'm concerned that we one of the great things about Westborough is that we're a very intermixed community, right? There are people of all ages living together, and I guess go ahead.
Well, as far and the other part was about like our long-term care facilities, our health facilities, those types of things. So the state gets very involved when there are cases in those, and there's actually special guidance for those facilities that the state gets involved with. Most of those facilities have healthcare professionals in them already. So I do know what's going on in a couple of them, just because they have reached out and all I can really say is that the state takes a special interest in those facilities as far as following up with the contacts and stuff.
So, Steve, I have a question for you. It had said that if there was a person in one of those long-term care facilities that tested positive, that they would not show up in our state or in our town numbers. Is that actually a true statement, or do they actually show up because they are a resident of Westborough?
Well, it depends. All right. So if you have a facility that is not a residential facility, but people may go there for treatment, then that probably would not be reported to us. But if it was a long-term care where that's their residential address, then it would.
Okay.
That's your question, because we have both. We have both in town, so it would really depend.
So if I can just,
Steve, that I'm
go ahead.
sorry.
Go ahead, Ted.
The reason I guess this is kind of preying on my mind is that it's been preying on my mind for a while, but it kind of what kicked me to really worry about this is that there was in Holyoke, I believe at the veterans home there were now 20. Steve, how many? You may know more. There was a rash of cases at a veterans facility home, and that worries me because.
Yeah. So Syed, if I can jump in on this, there's a couple of things. One is, it cuts both ways. Obviously, the only population we're really talking about are people who are in rehab, who expect to go back to their residence wherever they are. So to the extent that we don't necessarily get informed if they're not a Westborough resident, when our Westborough residents are in rehab facilities in other towns, we will get informed. And so, our role is primarily around the people who are citizens of our town. That being said, the Board of Health doesn't just monitor what's going on with respect to these issues, but we're also a resource. And I know that's part of the reason why these facilities do reach out to Steve when they have questions, because they know that they will get objective, useful information, and that we will work with them as partners in managing these things. And so I think that if there are clusters, if there are repeated situations where there are positive tests, the state's going to be in here working with us as partners as well. So I hear your concerns. I certainly heard about what had happened out in Western Massachusetts, but my feeling is things are working the way that they're supposed to right now, and so that's good. And as far as the workers themselves, if they live in Westborough, again, just like myself and many other healthcare workers, this is what we've signed up for. We take precautions as best we can. We do all the proper procedures, and we hope not to get infected.
Yeah, Shelby, it looks like you had your hand up. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I totally agree with the last component of what Dr. Ehrlich said, that it is the nature of the work, scary as that is. The folks that are going into these facilities are essential workers, and no matter what their certification is. And I would also add that I do think that we are starting to see, not here in Westborough, but in Worcester in particular, one of the salmon facilities have opened themselves up to being a COVID positive rehab location. I think many of you may have seen that in the news. So they're moving healthy patients to other facilities. I do think it would be helpful for our Board of Health to understand if any Westborough facility, because I know it's not just the salmon facilities that are doing this, if other facilities in Westborough are taking on this role, I think that's where we would certainly want to understand if there's going to be an influx of individuals that would be temporarily residing in Westborough facilities. I think that that's very appropriate for the Board of Health to understand.
And Shelby, right now to that piece, if you don't mind, what I read there is that certain of those patients from Worcester will be coming to Westborough into our statement facilities. So they can basically have the entire Worcester facility just isolated for COVID-19 patients.
That is correct. And my understanding is that it's not just the Salmon Beaumont properties that are doing this. There are several other chains, if you will, organizations that are now taking this on to respond to, this 30% plus increase. But I do think we should be aware if there was an influx of of COVID positive individuals. And again, whether they should be reported or not, that's, I think, a call for the Board of Health, but awareness is important.
Yeah, I think that anytime we have people moving across the town line, it becomes important for the Board of Health to know about. And even if it is healthy people that are coming from a facility with known cases, it is possible that those cases are infected but just haven't developed symptoms yet. And we worry about the risk then of them coming in. So maybe it's worth, Steve, reaching out to the Beaumont Salmon facility to just check and figure out what their quarantine procedure is for someone that is coming from a long-term care facility with COVID-19 patients into a facility that doesn't have any. Because I'd hate to have that disbursement cause all of the long-term care facilities in the area to then start getting infected patients. So I think that's something that we can just have Steve investigate to make sure that they're taking appropriate precautions there. The other comment I had about new cases was that at the Mass Department of Public Health meeting today with the local boards of health, they mentioned that, reiterated the fact that there are some doctors that are seeing patients or diagnosing patients with COVID-19 without a confirmed laboratory test. And they're allowed to do that. And they are required by law to report suspect cases through the Maven electronic reporting system. And so if they get put into that electronic record, then we should get notified of them, as part of that normal process. However, I think that there's a little bit of bureaucracy and red tape that has to happen in order for the doctors to put them into the system. Well, it happens automatically when you do one of these lab reporting tests. So those go in very easily, but the individual doctors sometimes don't enter the people into Maven. And so one of the things that came up is that maybe we can reach out to some of the doctors or the major practices that are seeing patients and kind of let them know and remind them that they are required to enter suspect patients into the Maven system so that we can properly track them. And I think that the Massachusetts Department of Public Health was going to look into whether they can issue a statewide memo to all the doctors' practices to remind them that it is required to do that. But just to be proactive, maybe we want to do something like that here in Westborough a little bit earlier before the state gets around to it. I don't know, Alan, if you've got any other comments on that issue before we move on to kind of some discussion around construction.
So I know that the situation at many of the medical offices is very fluid. I know I have a phone call tomorrow at 8 a.m. to get an update on, and I expect there to be changes in our procedures at that time. So, certainly a general reminder is helpful, but obviously there are a lot of get their health care outside of Westborough.
Yeah.
Or Westborough residents, and a lot of people who are not Westborough residents who do come to Westborough for their health care. So,
I'm not sure if it's my end or Alan's, but
I think it was on Alan's end. You were breaking up a little bit, Alan. Nathan,
right,
before you go,
go ahead.
So I was just going to go back, Nathan, before you go into the construction thing. That's just from our Board of Selectmen.
Yep.
We appreciate what you guys have done in terms of reporting. We're supportive of that, of the amount that's being provided. And as you know, as was discussed at the last meeting, we did put the first one out on the website, and our intention would be to continue to post that out as information to the town. And it sounds like you as a Board of Health was supportive of that still as well.
Yes, we are. I think that I'd like to do it. We can double check with Dr. Ehrlich and Dr. Hashmi, but I think also the twice a week reporting right now is probably sufficient. We can discuss, I think, as we start to get a lot more cases, then it might be, we could do it more often. But I think right now, I just don't want to be releasing information about like one new case and that allows people to then look at yesterday's report to then figure out all the details about that one case. So Dr. Hashmi, Dr. Ehrlich, you're happy with our current reporting system, and we're going to keep going with that.
Yeah,
we're going to change the quarantine, right?
Comments earlier. Yeah, other than the comments we made earlier, I'm happy.
Yep. Good.
Yeah, so just to be clear, we're going to change, which includes separating out the quarantine cases, right, Steve? Yes?
Yeah, hopefully Nathan will help me develop a way to separate that out, as he has helped me develop the sheet. So we'll figure something out.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, so the next thing that I wanted to talk about was that we had some residents that were asking the Board of Health about what to do about construction sites. And so I think, Steve, you went out to one construction site, and I think we asked the general manager to join us on this meeting in case we wanted to take any action on that. But right now, I believe that just to set the scene, we are allowing construction to still take place in Westborough. I believe that places like Boston have suspended construction, and maybe some other towns as well in Massachusetts. So I think that we're looking at something where all options are on the table. We can either keep going with where we are, we can change policy, or we can kind of do it, you know, depending on what policies they have in place, we can kind of do it one at a time.
Yeah, so I can give you a little bit of history, and then I can introduce, I think, Laurent, are you on the line? I was pretty sure I saw you earlier. Or Scott?
Yes, I'm on the line. I think Laurent's on as well. He might be muted.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
this
right,
is,
well,
by the way.
Okay, how you doing, Scott?
Good. Thanks.
So, you know, I got a complaint, a few complaints about a construction site. People were concerned about the number of people there, and, you know, perhaps a lack of social distancing, and, you know, other issues. So I went to the site today with the building inspector, and, you know, on arrival, I think I gave the board, they have developed some procedures as far as how to deal with some of the concerns that people have had as far as screening employees as they come in, having them self-report if they've had any kind of symptoms, if anyone is symptomatic, sending them home, trying to keep people separated as much as possible. When I was there today, you know, I didn't see a grouping of people. You know, there are some things that have to be done on a construction site that you need more than one person next to each other. You know, you think about lifting heavy things, or maybe, you know, I'm sure that, Laurent, you can go into some of this, but I was unfamiliar with that the state had actually given out guidelines last week about construction sites. I just found out about 3 hours ago. So I've been reviewing those. This is part of the problem. I think stuff comes out so quick from the state. It's like shotgunned out, and you know, it just takes a long time to absorb what is there and what our role is actually in this. So I don't know. I think maybe I'll turn it over to Laurent or Scott to kind of talk about what they're doing at their site more specifically, if that's okay.
Yep.
Sure. I'll just jump in here. Again, I'm Scott Weiss with the Gutierrez Company. Laurent is our project manager for the 800 West Park Drive. And David Delaney, our VP of Construction, is on as well. But Laurent can go through some of the procedures, which, as you said, are fluid and changing and updated constantly. And we have been responding to the changing climate as the directives come out. And Laurent can give you a little bit of a overview of what we're doing on West Park Drive.
Yes, so really the key for us is to make sure that, and these guidelines are very helpful to that end, is to make sure that we have a mechanism to have a comfort level that everybody that's on the job site has been screened in some fashion, that the workers are aware of their surroundings and that they're not congregating or bunched up in any one given area. So a lot of what we do, which is inherent to construction, is working on sequencing activities and trades and shifting crews to other parts of the building so that we can manage that. And that's worked well, where we have trades that are either inside or outside. specifically the drywallers, and we'll shift them to the exterior work when we have the HVAC contractors, for instance, on the same floor in the same area. Kind of the bigger task that we're escalating to this week, just based on the guidelines that we received, is a lot of screening. So temperature, and then inquiring about any symptoms, as well as any potential exposure to anybody that has been confirmed to be positive. So those are consistent with the guidelines that we received from the state. And so starting tomorrow, what we're doing is we're directing every worker to go through that pre-screening process before they can access the job. And that's something that we intend to maintain while we're on a daily basis, essentially. So every day, everybody would have to go through that.
Good, thank you.
So that's probably the biggest item.
Yeah, I think that Steve Bakari did actually go tour the work site, and the report that I heard was that everyone was actually fairly well spread out. You know, obviously he wasn't watching, you know, like lunch break and that sort of thing, where people might have a tendency to want to, you know, sit next to each other and talk about, you know, their life and what's going on. Obviously, that's a huge risk. I do have a question for our board. Does anyone know whether construction is listed as, you know, an essential business, or is it only certain parts of construction, or
according to? So, Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, and Christy, please jump in. According to the governor, the statement that has come out from the governor, it is, and he's allowed construction. I believe his lawyer or whatever from his department released something. However, you know, Boston, Cambridge, and I believe Somerville have all halted construction projects. And one of the concerns, and I don't know if you want to talk about this, Dr. Walsh, right now or not, is while I understand and commend the people at 800 Park Drive for the work that they're doing and for the screening, the issue, there are two issues, at least in my mind. One, that is one construction site of several that we have. We have several large construction sites that are going on in town. And we do, or, you know, asking Steve to, or the building inspector to do this on top of their other duties, I think is unfair. So that's my one concern. The second is, and this goes to something that you said, you know, earlier, you know, we are trying to decide between what part of the curve we're going to fall on the one with less patients or the one with more patients. And that's just not in our town, but it's across in our state. And there are people that have made tremendous sacrifices. I mean, you know, they've lost their jobs, they've lost their livelihoods to do that social distancing, to make that sacrifice for not just for me, but for the country as a whole. So I am personally deeply concerned about allowing us to do this.
Yep. Well, I'll chime in. They are essential. And actually, the governor put out a new list of essential services, and I think he even bulked up the construction stuff and added stuff to it. It was 9 pages before, now it's about 14. I breezed through it a little bit earlier, but you know, you bring up good points, Ed. So the reason I went out there is because of the complaint, but there's other big projects going on, like Amazon, and you got Pulte, and you know. And right now, I'm pretty much spending 99.9% of my time doing contact tracing for our cases. So, you know, and this is a little bit, if the state government thinks that all these local boards of health are going to be able to go around and make sure that the construction sites are actually doing what they're supposed to be doing, it's a tough haul. It's a tough lift right now for us. So, you know, I'll just put that in there.
I mean, to me, I'm deeply concerned about this issue. I don't know about the rest of the board. I am deeply concerned. You know, we are, I mean, the peak is starting to come. If you look at I don't know who sent me the numbers. If you look at the Massachusetts numbers, the acceleration of the curve has started. I mean, it's concerning. I don't know what the rest of the board feels.
Can I say something?
Yes, Christy, go ahead.
Thanks. I just, you know, I hear what you're saying in terms of construction and the need to social distance. Absolutely understand that. But there is a whole list of, like Steve said, several page list of different industries that are being identified as essential, including our public safety departments, our Department of Public Works. And so I'm not sure, I guess I know that we're talking about construction right now because that's what's in front of us, but that certainly is not the only concern we've heard from the community. And so as far as I can see, what we've done is we've just followed the state guidelines. And so I'm not sure why construction would be different from the other essential industries that we have on that list.
Yeah, so if I can address that, Christy. So in terms of the difference between construction and like our fire department going out and putting out fires and, burning buildings, there's a huge difference there in terms of public safety. And so they're different, first of all. So the second part is that if we look at Massachusetts and we go by what they're doing, they're growing at a rate of 30% a day. So to use them as our guideline means that we might also grow at 30% a day. If we decided to do something more restrictive, which we are allowed to do, we're not allowed to be less restrictive than Massachusetts, but we are allowed to be more restrictive. And so I think that's what we're talking about is which things do we want to be more restrictive than Massachusetts and which don't we? I think some of it is that if we encourage and have the ability to do a little bit more oversight on sites, we can allow things like construction to go on without needing to shut them all down. If we think they're doing a poor job, then obviously we can, just shut down all construction because we can't keep tabs on them all. But I do think that there is a big difference between, just construction in general and some of the other, safety departments that we have. Keeping our sewer system running in town and not having, our trash system running. All of those things, are very different than like building a new Amazon warehouse.
Right, but there are I guess my point was just that there are several pages of industry that fall into the same categories as construction. I understand that public safety is different.
So if I could just weigh in here briefly, and then I know some of the people on the Board of Selectmen are anxious to weigh in. I'm not sure, Nathan, I agree with you when you say those examples are different than building another Amazon warehouse. If you're talking about an office building, okay, maybe that's different. But I think we have to treat everybody the same. And if you ask me, when I think about another Amazon warehouse, I'm thinking this is, stuff that we need every day, whether it be toilet paper or other things flowing through the system. So I don't think we can just say, well, that's less important than making sure our trash is we have a place to take our trash or it's getting picked up or things like that. So to me, I hear the concerns of both you and Syed. My concerns, I certainly am concerned as well, but my focus is really on first at least trying to see what the people on these construction sites are doing, what they say they can do to mitigate the problems. And so I don't feel like I have enough information to really inform that. We did hear some of what Laurent had to say about what they're doing there. I guess the part that I would ask Laurent to elaborate on is the following. How is the message to the people who work there that if you're sick and you will not be punished for staying home, that type of thing? And I realize a lot of these are subcontractors, and that's why it gets more murky. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about what the message is and how that's communicated.
So I think I heard it was a little broken up, but I think I heard that the question was how is the message conveyed to the trades in terms of what the real goal is here, and so we just had a site-wide safety stand-down meeting today to roll out the latest protocol, and the opening point that we wanted to drive is that this only works if everybody's bought in. And the goal here is to make sure that we do not have any positive cases on the project. And so really, it's the message is that this is for the benefit of everybody involved on the project, every individual.
Right, and just to add in there to reinforce Laurent's point is it's not intended to be, some sort of penalty or anything of that nature. It's everyone cooperating together to run an efficient, well-distanced, cooperative construction activity.
And Scott, to that point, I think the question Dr. Ehrlich had, I mean, if with the procedures and the screening, if someone is sick, you're going to ask them to go home, and
so
they will be penalized for that.
Right, as indicated, I forget who said it. There are a number of different companies, subcontractors represented on site. We're working with, both management and foremen and construction superintendents out there to say that this is not, it's not a penalty from our perspective. It's not looking to, penalize any company or person. Let's all work on this together cooperatively for everyone's benefit is the way to approach it.
Can I follow up on that? I just want to follow up on that last point you made. Many contracts or subcontractors do have deadlines for which there are penalties if certain deadlines are not met. Are those things being waived in illness?
Maybe I can try to restate.
It seems like it's poor.
I think he's asking that if there are penalties imposed on subcontractors, is it, what is the policy involved with you guys in terms of the subcontractors? Will you then let them out of penalties and that sort of thing if it turns out that they are, in fact, can't do the work in the time frame because some of their workers are sick?
Yeah, so we definitely appreciate that comment all along for both us and our contractual requirements as well as those companies we contract with. And as we've all indicated and discussed, this is a very unique situation, and anyone familiar with contracting and the term force majeure, a situation, involving, acts of God and the conditions that are well beyond the control of any of us, relieves a lot of that pressure. And so those types of conditions are built into the contracts, and we are in, very unique, unusual circumstances here.
But
did you want to try again?
Yeah.
But Nathan, can I just comment? I'm just commenting this to the board. I think we need to look at this approach holistically, not at site specific, but holistically as an industry about what we want to do. I mean, I think it's great that we're asking. I'm sure that these guys look like they're on the ball and they have a process in place. But the issue is, the Board of Health is already stretched as it is with stuff that they need to do that is mission critical. We need to look at it as a board, what we want to do as a town. And that's what I think that we should focus our discussion on.
Yeah, so I think that we are going to, have to try to make a decision whether we act on the construction right now. I think that Alan is trying to adjust his audio so that he can call in and hear.
Yeah, so I switched to regular phone instead of the computer. Is this better?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Did that sufficiently answer the question that you had just asked?
It did. And the force majeure, I didn't know if you had to officially invoke it or if that just happens later on. That was part of where this was all going and, what the relationships were up and down the chain. So I think that was addressed.
Okay, so we are going to have more Board of Health meetings in the future. I think that we'll probably end up, doing one next week as well. So I guess right now, is there any motion on the table that we want to do something about construction, or are we going to just let it ride until next week, assuming that we have sufficient things in place right now where we're not worried? And so, Syed, I'm kind of looking at you if you want to put a motion.
Yeah, before I make that motion, I want to make sure that the Board of Selectmen don't have anything, because I respect the members of my board. I didn't know if they wanted to chime with anything before I make a motion, or want me to make a motion.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
Go ahead, Emily.
Yes.
Lee Emery. Two things. I think that we need to bow to the Board of Health's expertise and opinion on what we should do about construction sites. I know you have the interest of everyone's health in town in your hearts on that, in your minds, your professional opinion on that. And then lest the public misperceive something, the Amazon project isn't operative yet. It's not going to be a distribution center. It's research and development. So I just want to be clear on that.
Thank you.
Other members of the board have? I mean, I guess I'll jump in to that request. I guess I'm concerned with this one. I think Christy brought it up. We have many, that list is long of essential things, and I know we got caught up on public safety, fire, police, but we have things like liquor stores, and I'm not sure that we're out inspecting liquor stores. I'm not sure that we're inspecting takeout restaurants, which are allowed to be out. I think we have to be careful here, and I agree we're all on the same page. We want to be protective. I think there are, procedures that have been in place. They were just, announced, I think, last Friday and being updated. So I think Mr. Weiss said with that, but I think they have been deemed essential. I do understand the Board of Health, and I will defer to the Board of Health here, but I think, to me, I think looking independently without really looking through that list and saying, hey, is this the direction we want to go to, I think should be something that's considered by the Board of Health. I do think one of the beauties here, I did get a text from a resident with, I guess, a suggestion or a question as to whether the Board of Health, I know that, as Steve said, he is kind of inundated with the work he's doing on tracking cases and doing that work. Is it the potential to, not that we have a lot of free resources in town, but potentially to deputize somebody else, and maybe it's through a building inspector or whatever, if we are concerned about construction sites. We have folks that are out there pretty much daily. Is it the potential of using them to be out there to make sure that protocols that have been put in place by the state for construction sites is being adhered to, similar to how they would do it for other protocols that are put in place.
Yeah, so I think, in fact, today when Steve Bakari had gone out to the construction site, I believe that the building inspector went out with him. And so we are kind of using, other resources in town a little bit right now in tandem with our own resources. But it probably is possible for us to, leverage resources in town to go out instead of our resources, as long as they know what to look for.
Yeah, I agree, Nathan. I think that we could probably develop something with, I don't want to speak for Fred, but he's very, I think he would be open to having some kind of relationship with the two departments trying to figure this out.
Yeah, if I may.
Yep.
I have huge concerns with focusing specifically this kind of discussion on construction work. First of all, construction, as identified in the essential list, is much broader than what we're talking about here. It goes into landscaping and masons, and it goes on and on and on. So I think we need to be very careful with this discussion. I certainly understand and appreciate and trust the Board of Health will make the right decision. But I also think we have to trust the businesses to do what is in the best interest of their workers and public safety. speaking as a business owner, although in the healthcare space, I have every incentive to keep all of my employees healthy so that I can continue to thrive. And I don't look at what we do in some way, although it's a different, obviously, trade than what Mr. Weiss or anyone else in a different industry. They have every incentive to keep their employees safe as well, and their families and the public. And I think we also have to balance that with the limited resources that Steve has already shared with us. So Dr. Ehrlich made a great point before, and I think we need to better understand what the protocols are in place maybe for some major construction sites so we have particular interest and focus on, just because there's a mass of people gathering as opposed to, one person out maybe renovating a bathroom. I don't know. But I think we need to be careful of the slippery slope here. And Ian, you made the point about, what are we doing? I have firsthand knowledge of facilities that aren't, even though people are in isolation in their rooms, their workers aren't necessarily using gloves to deliver food from room to room. So, where does this stop? At some point, we have to take personal responsibility, and that includes businesses to do the right thing. But I don't think shutting everything down is the right way to go. Thank you.
Good. No, it's actually good to hear from the Selectmen. I appreciate all of your input. We do value input from everybody. It's not like we want to just be making decisions in isolation. So I'm glad you guys all got a chance to weigh in. I agree with many of the comments that we probably have not looked at that list in sufficient detail right now to go through and say that, yes, this part of construction is, justified, this part isn't. I would actually encourage all of the businesses in town, even if you fall on the governor's essential business list, to reevaluate whether you really need to be open, to ask yourself, are you really essential to the economy? Not is doing business essential for your income, but is your business really essential to, us surviving through this pandemic? We really do want people that can postpone, whether it be construction or landscaping or any of these things that might actually cause the spread of the virus, to postpone it, to not do it right now. And granted, a one-person landscaper that's coming in and having no interaction with, anybody else has no risk there. But certainly a construction site that has, 400 people working on it is very different. And so, yeah, we probably do need to make sure that we're targeting any sort of rule we put in place. And it might be appropriate for us to get a better sense of what's on that list. I know myself, I don't have a great, I have not looked at that list in the detail that some of the people from the Board of Selectmen have. But that doesn't mean I'm not willing to entertain a motion, but I think at this point, maybe the motion is premature.
So I agree with you, Nathan, on everything that you and the board have said. Maybe what we can do, so I suggest a two-pronged approach, okay? One, we can reach out, and again, this may not, Steve already has plenty on his plate to do, so, I'm asking, looking to Christy at this point, is it worthwhile just tasking somebody from, and again, I don't want to just asking someone to reach out to like Boston and Cambridge just to find out what their guidelines are, right? Just to get a sense of how they've worded their what they've done, and I think Somerville also has it. That's one. The second is I think we can reevaluate this. So that's one. Seeing what the guidelines are. Second, working with the building department to see if they can inspect other sites and then get back to us. The third suggestion I would have to this is that this be another agenda item for our next meeting next week. We can then look at the number of cases we've had. We can look at the percentage increase. We can look at where the curve is going, and then we can reevaluate.
Yeah, so I look toward maybe Steve or Christy, someone from the town. Is it something that you think either of you might be able to do to reach out to Boston or Cambridge to figure out what they implemented and, how if Westborough wanted to do something similar, how we might do that?
Yeah, I can do that.
And I can, I'm sure I can work with Fred and maybe go around to some of the bigger places in town just to see what's being done, making sure they're at least doing a minimum amount of stuff this week. I wouldn't be able to do it myself, but we can get that going, I think.
Yeah, I absolutely think the building department would be willing to work with even his department.
Good. So I think that sounds good. So I think at this point we're not. Alan, you'd like
just one quick thing. Shelby put it in the chat, but I think it's worth mentioning that before there's any decision about local differences between businesses allowed to be open and those considered essential, businesses that at the state level are deemed essential, or more importantly, the ones that are deemed non-essential and are being told to close, those employees have some additional protections under FMLA and the Department of Unemployment Insurance. I would want to make sure that if we're ordering businesses closed that are on the state's essential services list, that employees of those businesses and those businesses themselves still have the same level of protection.
So let me.
If the Board of Health were to locally order construction to stop, are those workers still protected by the changes in employment, things of that nature, because those businesses are currently on the essential business list?
Right. So let me public health. And that if
go ahead.
If we thought that there was a public health risk to those businesses being open, and we decided that, because they're not going to get unemployment or some sort of loan from the government, we're going to just allow them to keep going and keep working and making the disease worse, that's not good policy. We don't want to make a policy based on money. What we'd want to do is make it based on, what's best for public health. We can weigh some of the financial considerations in place, but I do think that from the Board of Health point of view, we want to be focused on what's actually good for public health.
Okay.
So I hear you, and I hear that, yes, any change that we do that's different from the state might have implications, and it would be good for us to know what those implications are. But by the same token, we're looking at it from the lens of, public health and trying to mitigate the spread of this disease. I think the cost impact of having this disease spread from 19 people to 750 people in town significantly outweighs the cost of delaying some of these projects. So I hear you, but at the same
absolutely. But I just think we should be aware of that potential impact, or understand if it's not an impact at all.
Yep.
So towards that goal, obviously, when we reach out to the other communities like Boston and Somerville, those are some of the questions that we should get answers to.
Very well said, Alan. The only other thing that I had on my agenda was, I guess, convenience stores are being targeted differently than supermarkets when it comes to self-service areas. And so supermarkets were told to close their self-service areas, but I guess convenience stores like Cumberland Farms is still allowed to do self-serve coffee or soda filling machines where customers can go up and use those. And so the Mass Department of Public Health said that if we wanted to publish some rules and guidance to local towns operating here, we could. Some of the things they recommended were things like saying that you shouldn't have common use creamers and that sort of thing. And then instead, if you had single serve creamers only, those sorts of things would actually go toward helping to stop the spread of, having customers touch the same objects over and over again. And so I kind of wanted to bring that before the board to see what the board thought about some of those issues.
Can I comment on this first? So I was on the call also, and I think the information that was given out was incorrect.
Oh, okay.
I will tell you exactly what. So see, the person who was commenting on the line, she's from the Division of Community Sanitation, but it's not from the Food Protection Program. They should really probably have had someone there from the Food Protection Program. But anyways, what they've asked now, and I'll read directly what it talks about. In an effort to reduce the spread of COVID-19, restaurants and other retail food establishments are strongly recommended to eliminate buffets, self-serve salad, and hot bars until the state emergency is lifted. And condiments must be dispensed in single-service type package. So weeks ago, we went around to Cumberland Farms, all the grocery stores, and had them stop doing any kind of open buffet or toppings bars. We've stopped those weeks ago. Okay. So really the only thing that we've allowed to do now is it's self-serve coffee and the drink machines where you push the lever. And places like Cumberland Farms have put up signs. You cannot bring a refillable container. You must use one of their single serve cups for it. So yeah, that's kind of how we interpreted it. It was spelled out that they wanted these open bars where you got like a spoon and a ladle in the thing, those types of things. And we've gone around and eliminated all those. I guess the question is now, does that order also pertain to coffee, like coffee urns or things like that, which are closed encapsulated vessels, which people still can touch the nozzle. My understanding is that with Cumberland Farms, they're going around sanitizing every 30 minutes or so of that. But so I don't think the information we heard today in the state call was actually accurate.
So my feeling on this is that things where you're touching the nozzle, the handle, you pull a lever in order to dispense the liquid. Wiping it down every 30 minutes is woefully insufficient. Because I mean, in a busy morning, I can only imagine how many people are touching that thing, in the span of 30 minutes. I think it's different when you have the soft drink machines where you're simply pushing a lever with the edge of the cup and the beverage is dispensed. And so, I think the ones where you are physically touching a lever and with your hand and pulling it down represent a risk that probably we should be cracking down on.
Dr. Walsh, if I may just jump in for a second, if construction topic is all over, Laurent and I and David will bow out and let you guys continue.
Yeah, thank you for coming. Syed and or Dr.
Yeah, thank you for your time and thank you thank you so much for your perspective. Thank you. Be safe.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I tend to agree with Dr. Ehrlich about the common touching surfaces. Having people pushing the same button one after another, or holding the same coffee pot one after another, does sound like a fairly bad risk. I don't know, Steve, whether you have a sense when you went around to kind of give these, is it mostly people that are doing coffee cups, or is it mostly people that are have kind of a soda dispensing sort of situation?
Well, when I've gone in, I go in the morning, so it's mainly coffee at that time. But think about it this way: every time someone grabs a handle on the refrigerated case to open up the door, they're touching that. Some of these places you have to grab the door to open up. So there's a lot of areas where gas pumps, you're touching that. I mean, so it's just a matter of what you think is where you think the hazards are. I'm sure that if we talk to some of these places with maybe they could put individual, kind of like not tissues, but those individual papers, people could grab that when they touch the nozzle. Maybe, we could talk to them about some way to protect everybody. But I don't know. I'm sure as afternoon goes on, it's more the drink dispensers. In the morning, it seems like it's coffee.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not sure that we're trying to solve every problem all at once. I know that, everything from doors to gas pumps to, things that you're about to consume, eat or drink, they're all potential risk points, and we all have to kind of consider which ones do we tackle? Do we tackle all of them or just some of them? At this point, I think I'm looking for ideas for us to slow the spread, not necessarily find every single possible risk point and eliminate it. I'm looking at the trend and saying that the trend that we have right now seems higher than where we want to be. So I'm trying to look at trying to bend that curve just a little bit more without really inconveniencing people. I think certainly closing all gas pumps or something like that would be really detrimental to all of our emergency essential personnel out there. So I'm not quite sure I'm even ready to entertain that sort of motion. But in terms of having the companies find ways of dispensing coffee in a slightly safer manner, I think that could be possible.
May I, Lee?
Yeah, go ahead.
When you think about risks, though, every single thing in the supermarket is putting at risk. Every plastic bag of broccoli you pick up, every apple could have been touched or breathed upon by any number of people. So there's just so much you can really do. I mean, people have to wash their hands, wear gloves to the store, wear gloves to pump your gas, take them off appropriately, wash your hands before you get in your car with your liquid thing, and wash them when you get home, all those things. Otherwise, you can't really touch anything.
So I think that, there is no limit to where you could, extrapolate those types of things. But the difference here is, first of all, it's a very focal point. Everyone's going to exactly the same point. When you're talking about the door to open the refrigerator, people grab it at different heights and things like that. So there are some differences. I also do think that there are situations here where it may be possible to take steps to lessen the risk. So Steve had mentioned the notion of having little, the things that you would use if you're going to pick up a donut out of the bakery thing, those little disposable tissue papers. If those were available at the dispensing areas and people were instructed, by the people who work there to use those to pull on the knobs and then throw them away, that would be an improvement for me, from my perspective, and that might be a solution. Again, we're focusing on things that have been brought to our attention that we think there might be practical steps that can be taken. And again, we know we're not going to be able to solve all things, and that's why the virus continues to spread.
I make a suggestion. Maybe with Ray and Aaron, I could have them go around the places that are doing this type of thing still, and talk to them and see, and maybe kind of present to you, maybe a happy medium of things that could be done, maybe to keep things going and offer better protection.
Yeah, I would recommend.
That sounds good.
We try to do it by phone if you can, as opposed to going there. And if you ask them to come up with ideas, they might be even more creative than we are about things that might work.
Well, we still are inspecting the places. It's an essential function, and I feel that the board should be supporting that. And, so we are going into these places to inspect. So, either way, we could call too, but it's better when you're on site. You can kind of talk about what could be done, and you're right there, and you can kind of feel it out as far as with the people, as far as what might work better than others. And there may be certain logistics of why one thing might work better at one place than at another. But if you think we should just do it by phone, that's fine too.
I will say that I've gotten some feedback of concern about how much is the health department inspecting places that are open. So I would lean in favor of on-site visits, maintaining social distancing as is instructed. I think you can do both.
Okay, I'm in support of that as well. So I don't think there's any actions that the board needs to take on any of these items. I think that we're just kind of leave them with you, Steve, and I think there was an item for you, Christy, as well. And I think we plan on doing another joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen next week. And I think that we have a report that we will give, I think, on Friday about updated cases from this week. Is there anything else, Dr. Hashmi or Dr. Ehrlich, that you wanted to discuss?
Not me.
Just for me, just so that we have a list. So the things to follow up on are, one, just checking with the other towns about their requirements, potentially having the planning department visit the other sites of construction, and then revisiting this topic, and then the rest from this discussion. Steve, did I miss anything, or Christy, did I miss anything?
I don't think so. Obviously, I'll report back to you on what I think, as far as the whole, coffee soda thing. But
Dr. Walsh? Dr. Walsh?
Yes, go ahead.
I just had a question, Lee. Steve was saying how, and he's been saying this for a while now, how many things he has to do, which I can I probably can't even comprehend. But he did say at our last get together that the school nurses had volunteered to help in some way. And I'm wondering if he is starting to think about offloading some of the tracking to that professional group. It might help him do things that only somebody like him is trained to do.
Yeah, Steve, why don't you go ahead and address that? Because I think you've taken.
I had a call Monday morning because this weekend was kind of rough. Monday morning, I called the head of the school nurses. We had a discussion. We are working towards getting people onboarded to do the work. So they're all for it. So it's in the process, Lee. Let's put it that way. Yep.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
And I do believe that the state has reached out to some of the academic universities. There's students that are in public health departments that are going to graduate with public health degrees, have volunteered their time, or at least the universities have volunteered the students' time. And I believe there's over 1,000 students that are trained and willing to help public health departments like ours do the contact tracing and that sort of thing. So I've actually asked Steve to make sure that as his workload increases with his contract tracing, to make sure that not only reach out to those nurses in the school department, but also to reach out to the state government to help connect up with the students. I don't know if my screen just froze, but I think that was all I had.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to adjourn the Board of Health meeting.
Yep, I would like, Ian, I don't know if there's anything else that you want to talk about or the Board of Health, or sorry, Board of Selectmen needs to do, but I think the Board of Health is done with our meeting.
No, I think we're done with ours as well. We completed our scheduled business before that, so it's just participating with you. So I heard a motion on your side, and I'll take a motion on the Board of Selectmen side.
Yep.
Once
we have a second for the Board of Health closing meeting.
I guess I'll second it. It's Hashmi. Hashmi seconds that motion.
Okay, we'll do a roll call. Hashmi?
Yes, and just thank you to my fellow board members on both sides of the aisle for their help and their advice, and for all the town staff, both at all levels. This is Selectman Edinburgh put it. This has been a lot of work, but it's needed. This is an unprecedented event. So thank you. Yes. So yes.
Dr. Ehrlich?
I vote yes also.
And Dr. Walsh is a yes as well. So that's 3-0. So we close out our Board of Health. I'll hand it off to you, Ian.
Sure. Is there a motion from the Board of Selectmen for adjournment?
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Okay. Moved by Emery, seconded by Selectman Edinburgh. Roll call vote. Selectman Edinburgh?
Yes.
Selectman Emery?
Yes.
Selectman Marshall?
Yes.
Selectman Hashmi?
Yes.
And Selectman Johnson, yes. So we are adjourned. Thank you to the Board of Health and to the Board of Selectmen. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.